everyone, Andy Roddick here. Thank you so much for joining and watching Served. Is it Served the podcast? Served with?
Served.
Just Served. It's like a early 2000s movie reference. I'm like, you got served. Like I should anyways. It's not going to be this bad forever. I promise you we're going to get better. It's going to be great. I look forward to this show. Why we are doing this. I feel like everything in tennis media is currently centered around live television, right? There's no place to go on a Tuesday to really kind of take a deeper dive and not have the topical 45 seconds of this player good, this player bad. We'll move on. We'll see you in 4 months in Paris. Want to take a deeper dive in matchups, break down some stuff, get into some stories, give honest opinions, even if they might get us into some trouble sometimes, but give honest feedback, take a little bit of a look under the hood. Listen, live television rights are insane. I can't afford those, but we can stand just outside the stadium, rap with each other, a little bit more connection. To you, we're going to mess around with some stuff on this channel, on this medium. We're going to try to maybe figure out a draw breakdown show. We're going to do some Q&A shows that we're going to kind of check out, look into as soon as we talk to the powers that be and where we can air them and see if they'll actually take us. I don't know. They might not. We're going to try really hard. Wanted to do this for a very, very long time. Feels like the right moment. I appreciate you checking us out right here. Follow, subscribe. Even if you don't make it the entire show with us, like at least just, give me like a pity like or a pity subscribe, or even write at Tennis Channel and say this should be on TV. That was fun. Wasn't the worst thing I've ever seen. All right, and now the first guest in Served history, and I've been actively begging him to just join me full time as a co-host. We'll see. Maybe just flood all of his socials and say that you want him all on also. My friend, Jon Wertheim. We have a lot of history. Obviously, I was on the other side of some tough questioning during my career. Maybe some tough conversations. I think then it gradually went to respect and, dare I say, has turned into a friendship. Jon, where are you and how are you?
I'm good. Thanks for the intro. You'll get some tough questions today. I think good to be here, and you and I could probably not be further away geographically. I'm in Sydney, a little bit different time zone than when you are, I think.
If I am correct, I saw you on Tennis Channel like 2 days ago, and that's in Los Angeles. So are you the only tennis journalist on earth that waits for the Australian Open to end and then flies to Australia?
I pride myself on my timing, Andy. You like how that worked? I literally was flying to Australia during the men's final. Don't tell anyone. I did 2 weeks in Santa Monica and then flew to Australia because what better way to cover the Australian Open?
And so are you just celebrating like empty nester, just flying as far as you can weekly, or how does that work?
Yeah, I'll be at the Super Bowl on February 16th. I'll be in Vegas. Just you wait. You got a long way to go, but empty nest changes everything. So my travel schedule is pretty crazy, but you don't have kids and homework and piano recitals and sports games. Kind of frees things up. You'll see in about 15 years.
It's different. It feels like our lives are on different paths. I spent today. My wife has the flu, has been quarantined away, and I went to Starbucks just hoping my daughter wouldn't crap her pants. So that was that was something. So it sounds like we're maybe different life moments right now. Anyways.
Yeah, I'm thinking we're far away geographically. We're probably we're not on the same page as far as life phases either. But that's all right. We'll make it work. We'll talk some tennis. We'll bridge these gaps. And good to be with you, man.
Well, the good news is that I think we're closer athletically than we've ever been before, and I guess that's more of a read on me than you. But anyway, so you were in the air for Sinner Medvedev as they finished, and obviously for those who don't know, I don't know why you'd be watching this show if you didn't pay attention to the Australian Open final. But anyways, I digress. Medvedev wins the first two sets, pretty straightforward. 3-3. There was an early tell that maybe he didn't feel like he had his legs. He came out and he was probably more aggressive than I've ever seen him before, coming in, stepping in on returns, taking the first ball, driving it to the corners. Sinner was a little bit shell-shocked. I think it was simultaneously a great strategy from one of the best strategists in the game in Medvedev, and also something that he had to do. I mean, the guy's coming off, back-to-back five-setters. I think the stat was he spent more time on court during this Grand Slam than anyone in any slam ever. But the thing that just amazes me is obviously Sinner's medal, and we'll get into all of that. But the thing when I'm watching this and I see this new prototype of a professional tennis player where you're super skinny, you're super athletic, you're super fit, you can get in and out of the corners, and you're 6'7", you're 6'4". Like this new athlete in tennis, I was considered big when I played. I'm 6'2", barely. Like now you have guys like Medvedev, and not all that athletic. I had, I could serve, but not super athletic. Now you have these guys that get in and out of the corners. They all play well off both sides. They can take you line, they can take you cross. Sinner's hitting open stance, kind of recovery shots, but sticking them line out of nowhere. I mean, is this something? I feel like I'm taking crazy pills when I watch this. It just doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys saw when they shook hands at the net, and it looked like NBA small forwards after a game. I mean, it's like 6'6", 6'7", and 6'5", and you would never know it from the way they play. I think that's a really good point. I mean, we talk about evolution in so many ways, right? I mean, the miles per hour go up, and they're no more surface specialists. I think that's a great point. That lanky physique, it wasn't that long ago that you said, okay, well, he probably has a big serve, but we'll get him moving side to side and the movement will be compromised and we'll be okay. That was not a match among guys 6'6" and 6'5" that you would have seen even 10 or 15 years ago when you played.
Yeah, and I say this lovingly because I love Todd Martin, right? 6'6", was a great hand skills, would come forward, affected you in a bunch of different ways. Great, one of the best spot servers that we've had. I think of a guy named Michael Stich who won Wimbledon in 1991, kind of flat-footed, super skinny, but also came forward, right? Affected you kind of with this all-out pressure assault. He wasn't standing 12 feet behind the baseline, hitting flat returns and then saying, playing goalie. Like, where are you going to beat me? Where is there a hole? And I draw the parallel. I was thinking about it. I go, we've seen something similar in the NBA, maybe starting with a Dirk Nowitzki and then kind of going to like a LeBron James or LeBron and then Dirk, where LeBron James is physically bigger than Karl Malone. And he's also simultaneously the fastest guy on the court. Dirk Nowitzki, all of a sudden you had to guard someone 7 feet tall that had range to 26 or 27 feet. I feel like that's what we're seeing. We talk about the next generation post Big Three. I think this is it. Like, I don't know where the holes are with these guys.
Yeah, I mean, these guys, again, you said it. A generation ago, we'd say, okay, well, it's a big lumbering Russian and he'll serve hard, but we'll get him moving. And you look for everything from the court positioning. We had all these jokes. I don't know if you saw the interview that Medvedev did with Courier that he was going to, return serve in Hobart, Tasmania. And then suddenly he didn't. And then he comes back from his next match and he serves at he stands at the baseline. And I thought his tactics against Sinner looked like it was really interesting. As you said, he'd lost 8 sets before that final. He played a lot of tennis. He knew he couldn't have his conventional game plan. But yeah, that was really sort of an elevated example of tennis. And if this is the future of the sport, so be it. But the flip side too is there are other physiques that tennis could also accommodate. It's not like you've got to be 6'6" or you can't get on the ride. So I think this all bodes really well for sort of variety going forward.
Yeah, there's a pretty good young player out of Spain who is not 6'6". I think he's like best kept secret. I think he's barely 6 feet, if at all, named Carlos Alcaraz, who is changing the game with his athleticism as well. As I'm watching this match, I felt like Sinner knew that Medvedev might not have the legs. I think he had kind of generally the more hope in his disposition, even in the third set, than you would see most guys who just got kind of run through 3-3. Didn't feel like he was searching for answers. There is a maturity about this kid Sinner. It's just he doesn't get rattled. He doesn't overreact. Isn't demonstrative for the sake of being demonstrative. A genuine sense of belief. And for me, from where I sit, it's been really fun to watch his progression, right? So 3 years ago, makes finals in Miami. The guy's, flirting with the top 10. He's a prospect that comes off of people's lips very quickly when talking about who's next. But it wasn't an Alcaraz type ascent where he goes from 40 in the world to 1 in 10 weeks, right? His first serve could get better. His body needed to improve. He still had these peaks and valleys in matches where he liked playing aggressively, but also at 4-all in the first set, he would all of a sudden dump 2 balls out of nowhere. And there was a belief system, and seeing him kind of calmly worked through this process, and a lot of credit goes to his previous coach and his present coach, Darren Cahill, with kind of creating and filling the gaps and making him an absolute complete player. He was all offense when he came on tour. Defensively, he was phenomenal in this match against Medvedev. Unbelievable.
I'll give you two things real quick. If we had this conversation 90 days ago, how much different would we be talking about Sinner? Well, he's a big talent, but what do we say about him? He's a little bit maybe not as durable as he needs to be, and he loses a lot of 5-setters, maybe a little soft. At one point, I think he'd lost 4 of 5 matches at majors that he lost were 5-setters, often when he was leading, and the one in between was when Novak tuned him in Wimbledon and he didn't even get a set. And you sort of said, he's at that level, sort of a nice, maybe 6-12 player, but still has some toughness. The other thing, look where he's from on the map. And we say, the first Italian champion, Italy's Jannik Sinner. Look where he's from. And we all know about his skiing background. He grew up in the Italian Alps. I mean, he's about as far from the Austrian border as you are from your garage. He's closer to Munich than he is to Milan. I mean, he rooted for the soccer teams in Munich and not in Italy. That's how much closer Germany and Austria were. And there's something, not to stereotype too much, he is much more Teutonic in his disposition than he is sort of what we think characteristically Italians are like. And I think that's something that he sort of brought to bear. I mean, he goes down, he's the overwhelming favorite to beat Medvedev. I mean, imagine that. You're in your first major final, and you're like a plus 300 favorite to beat the guy on the other side of the net. He's played a lot of tennis. You've beaten him the last 3 times you played. This wasn't like a happy to be here. I mean, he was picked to win that match, loses the first 2 sets, and then is able to reset. Yes, it helped that the opponent was clearly gassed, but I give him a lot of credit because he's in a much different place than where he was literally 90 days ago. When we talked about those defeats of Novak in the fall. I mean, at the U.S. Open, he lost in 5 to Zverev. Before that, he lost to Novak at Wimbledon. He lost a 5-setter he probably shouldn't have lost to Altmaier at the French Open. This was not a guy you would think would knuckle down in his first major final. So for him to win, for him to sort of play out the hand, win those 7 matches, win that final down 2-0, I give him a lot of credit. But we can talk about the women. I said the same thing about Sabalenka to get ahead of ourselves, but there is a very different book on him than if we had been talking about Jannik Sinner on Halloween. I mean, not that much time has elapsed, and he's completely changed sort of his composite profile.
Yeah, I think we generally in this era of like everything now, when we analyze everything and we're expected to have a hot take immediately after every single match, I feel like we kind of overlook room for growth. And, as a tennis player, you can't let progress be the enemy of perfect, right? Like, and Jannik Sinner his serve has gotten better. Every year he's gotten stronger. He can now play defense. I mean, he plays this like sliding open stance on both sides, like an open stance backhand sliding and hitting it, redirecting line. Like that causes me like night sweats now, and I don't even have to deal with it. Like it doesn't make any sense. But also something that I would have been completely wrong about, maybe not completely wrong, but that I thought wasn't getting enough attention about Jannik Sinner. Now he goes on this run last fall. Everything's 2 out of 3 sets. Everything's indoors. Everything is a predictable bounce, and he can take the racket out of people's hands. Now, people automatically wanted to try to say, oh, he's coming off this heater and going to Australia. And I'm going, wait a minute, different surface. The momentum has stopped because, confidence might still be there, but momentum's not. You got to restart after you haven't played for 6 weeks. He didn't play a warm-up event. So I'm going, wait a minute, we can't just like take what happened in Vienna in Turin with a home crowd in a lightning fast court where you couldn't actually spread the court because the ball went through it too quickly and say, oh, that's going to translate to Australia perfectly. So credit to him. That's a mental win in itself, having the confidence just kind of roll up and do it. And he was locked in. I mean, he didn't give Medvedev any room to breathe. They had this rally. It was 30-all first game of the 5th set, and fast forward up until that point when you do watch it back, 39-ball rally. These guys both coming out of their shoes. Medvedev makes 4 saves out of the left corner with the backhand to reestablish, fires 4 balls line, going toe-to-toe. That's a 30-all on Sinner's serve. So Medvedev kind of making that last stand, played an unbelievable point. I mean, Jimmy Connors was my coach for a little bit, and he had this saying: when you played good points and it didn't go your way, that the operation was successful, but sometimes the patient dies. That was Medvedev in that rally. Like he could not have asked more of himself to come up on the losing end of it, and you could see him for the first time in the entire tournament, hands on the knees, going, "I don't know if I actually have anything left." And then, he serves and volleys a couple times, tries to end the point quickly, and you get the people that are going, "Well, is that a good decision?" I go, "Is that his only decision?" That's the question. It's not a matter of in a perfect world, what would you do? It was far less than a perfect world. He was in a vice at that point with Sinner, but props to both of them. Like, I know we always celebrate the winner, and people are going to knock Medvedev for being up 2 sets, let it go. That's trash if you do that, because that is no way representative of what he did this entire tournament and what, frankly, he's done for 5 or 6 years. One of the more underappreciated players ever. And I'll throw myself under the bus on this one. There was, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts on it, but Twitter the other day, there's some conversation going that I get looped in, and they're going, well, someone said Medvedev's the best player ever who has 1 slam. And I was the answer or the counter. And I'll just tell everyone right now, he's better than I ever was. Like, he has 20 some odd titles. He's won however many Masters Series events, won World Tour finals, has been number 1 in the world. Oh, by the way, beat Novak Djokovic in a Grand Slam final, has put himself there. I mean, he's been in back-to-back Grand Slam finals. This guy is better. If anyone calls him a 1 slam wonder, they're idiots and they don't know what they're talking about.
And also, look at the matches he lost when he got to the final, right? I mean, he lost to Novak, he lost to Rafa twice. Okay, maybe he should, but it's Rafa on the other side of the net. And then he had played 24 hours of tennis, and gee, wouldn't you know it, he got a little tired. I mean, there's not like a bad loss in there. We cannot mention his titles without the factoid that he has never won the same title twice, which is one of the most random tennis statistics you'll find. But no, I agree with you 100%. He's also 27. I mean, there's still some room here.
Time.
You would like to see the success replicated, or I mean, it's obviously, this is a hard court player, right? I mean, he hasn't had the success on clay and grass, but no, I'm with you 100%. I mean, in retrospect, whether we could talk about the match that ends at 3:40 in the morning, or the fact that in his last 2 matches before the final, he actually lost more points than he won and still figured out a way to win. I'm sure he's stung by disappointment this morning, but I think with some detachment, he ought to be pretty pleased with this. You mentioned it in passing. Let me ask you what you make about Sinner's semifinal win. And I think you're right. I think a lot of people said, well, he beat Novak, but it was a fall. It was indoors. Fall tends not to have great predictive value. The fact that he came back and did it in a best-of-5 format and just absolute, whether you want to say Novak played the worst match in a major you've ever seen him play, or that was a function of the pressure Sinner put on him. What do you make of it? Going both ways, both sides of the coin? What do you make of that semifinal win over Novak?
Well, one, you can't take a win away from someone because someone else played badly. Like, you have a direct effect on how someone else plays, to your point. And also, when you win the first 2 sets easily, or even like if you win a 6-0 set and then all of a sudden you're at 6-all in the second set and it turns and you're like, wait, I've outplayed this person for 3/4 of our time spent here. So for Novak to attempt to turn it and then to close him out after letting that third set go, like that's big time stuff. To come out and punch someone in the mouth who's the greatest of all time, is impressive. And I'm one of the guys, and I still believe it. I'd say it next time too. Beating the best of all time in 2 out of 3 sets versus 3 out of 5 is just a different mental animal. And so credit to Sinner. We've mentioned his losses. We've mentioned the warts in the slams the last couple of years, but you never felt like it got him down. He showed up the next day. You feel like you picture him the Wednesday after losing on a Saturday and he's getting his work in, doing it again. But going and, it's weird. He's one of the rare guys that has enough firepower, and you have to have the firepower in both hands, on both sides of your body, forehand and backhand, in order to affect Novak the way that he did, right? I played Novak, I played Rafa, I played Roger. I couldn't make a dent off of one side of my body and had to pay the price for it. You have to be supremely talented on both sides and be able to hit it both directions, right? We've talked about Novak's superpower before. It is getting the matchup inside of the points that he wants by virtue of being able to switch directions comfortably. Now he has someone who probably hits the ball harder, who can also switch directions. Probably not the consistency that Novak has, but Sinner now has two punches that Novak has to respect when they get in the ring, right? And so Novak knows that. All of those things play into Novak not playing well. So now the Novak side of the coin, listen, time is undefeated, right? And we say that, and he's fought it off as well as anyone. From where I sat, it was weird seeing him try to generate energy for a semifinal, especially at his favorite place in Australia. And I felt like for those first two sets, he was trying to find motivation, energy. You know, he wanted to he's normally good at finding someone to fight with, you know, and using that as a tool to kind of get him going. And I just, frankly, we've all been there. Novak way less than the rest of us, which is why he is who he is. And the rest of us, you know, are in our garages doing podcasts. But, you know, his ability to kind of find a way to motivate himself is also a superpower, right? People are like, oh, he acts this way. I'm like, no, that's a tool. You're looking at it the wrong way. He uses a tool. We might not like it. It might be uncouth and we might not, but we can't argue with the results of it. So for the first time in a long time, you see him sometimes if he's getting beat straight out. You saw the U.S. Open against Medvedev. It felt like he was searching for it, but that was like the moment being too big. He might have wanted it too much. This,
yeah.
Sorry, when he lost to Medvedev in the final, and you know when he was going for the calendar year slam,
right.
That was weird because he was having to adjust to the crowd cheering for him. Right. So he couldn't use that like visceral me versus you thing. And that was confusing. I thought I was in the stadium that day. And the match against Sinner was the first time in a long time I saw him kind of searching for an energy source or motivation source on top of a matchup that has very quickly become a difficult one for him.
Yeah. I mean, 36 and a half year old man loses in semifinals of major is usually, you know, that's not usually something to mourn. What's your level of concern here? That you know when you know this too. When athletes reach a certain age, the consistency tends to go, and when you don't have a good day, it can be really bad. How much of this is just bad day at the office, flush it, go on to your next event, and how much of it do you feel like this was really a hinge point moment?
Well, I think it's going to be about the mental gymnastics and how those play out. Like I for 10 years, I haven't been concerned about Novak playing Indian Wells or Miami or whichever hardcourt event he's going to play next. Like it's just not as important as the slams. And he's been able to show up to the slams and play well and get results. I'm very interested to see how he comes out of the gates in an Indian Wells or a Miami and kind of deals with kind of the pressure and the defeat and on a massive level. You know, even the Alcaraz Wimbledon final was spectacular. He kind of limped out of this tournament a little bit, you know, through no fault of his own. The guy's been better than anyone on earth, and it's going to happen. But I'm a little concerned. One, he's not getting younger. When it turns quickly, and also he has guys that can punch him in the mouth. You know, he has this new generation that once they know they can beat him, they're not going to revert back to their, you know, the mentality that there's no way to beat this guy.
Yeah, I mean, I talked to him. I talked to him about Wimbledon at some length when I saw him in November, and he sort of said, "Look, you know, do I wish I'd won Wimbledon that I hadn't lost to Alcaraz? Yeah, but in a weird way, it was really energizing, and I wanted to go to Cincinnati and not lose, and I didn't, and then I wanted to go reclaim my throne, and this is my court at the Open, and he did. This is a much different defeat. So on the one hand, he's already had experience, even in the last 6 months. What is it like to go to a major, not perform to your expectation, lose to a guy 15 years young? Like, he's done that drill. And he came back really strong from it. The difference is losing a Wimbledon final to Alcaraz with a couple of points here and there, and it's electric atmosphere. That's different than coming out flat and dropping 2 sets in under an hour, stealing a third set, and then everyone's thinking, okay, the window's closed on the kid. It says Novak's back. Novak got his reprieve. and then he promptly loses a break and goes out in 4. So I'm interested to see, if he's good at one thing, it's finding motivation. I mean, this is not someone who has to sort of outwit himself to be inspired, but I gotta think he's asking himself some pretty tough questions. That was a strange tournament overall for him, I thought, and certainly the result I'm not sure is all that surprising. I mean, again, 22-year-old beats 36-and-a-half-year-old, not a crazy result, but the scoreline and sort of the tenor of the match was like nothing I've seen from him in a long, long time.
I also, it was a weird choice from where I sit, and I'm sure he has his reasons, and he certainly doesn't need our opinion on scheduling. He's done it masterfully. But finishing last year late, playing a very heavy run from, Paris through World Tour finals, choosing to play Davis Cup, and then showing up early to Australia, something he hasn't done for a lot of those 10 victories, being there for 2 or 3 weeks before. I wonder if there's some kind of remorse, maybe questioning your own decision-making a little bit. Like, I promise you, I never won anything 10 times, but if I had, I would have done it the exact same way. I wouldn't eat a different meal if I had won Indianapolis once, much less Australia 10 times. RAP Indy, sorry about your tournament. But yeah, I don't know. It just seems like I wouldn't invite like outlier decisions into the equation. Is that weird? Is that reading too much into it?
No, and I think there was also a shakeup in the camp. So, he doesn't have the same manager he didn't have the same agent that he did. His hitting partner is now his manager. I mean, I think there's a fair amount going on behind the scenes. But no, I mean, it's a really interesting point. Why mess with this? Also, bear in mind that 3 top players didn't play anything. They kind of, I said, it's like you wake up and sometimes you wake up with bedhead and you wish you hadn't slept in, and other times you sleep in and you feel great. And both finalists played 0 warm-ups, and you had other guys. I think Nadal left on Christmas Eve. I mean, you had other guys leaving, 3 weeks into December for this trip. So, all part of what we love about the sport, right? I mean, it's not just X's and O's when the ball's in play. There's a whole strategy and preparation component to this too, right?
As someone who dealt, kind of made scheduling choices based out of like insecurity of not getting enough matches and not feeling prepared, to have that confidence to just rock up and be ready to go, like that's a different level. That's something that I never really thought about. 2 players that I want to just touch on quickly is on the men's side, and then I definitely there's a lot to get into on the women's side. I thought Sabalenka was dominant, and we need to certainly give her props and also talk about, you mentioned 90 days with Sinner, but 15 months ago Sabalenka was like Chuck Knobloch to first. Like there were some serious yips, right? But let's cover Carlos Alcaraz. Obviously, as young as he is, Masters titles, 2 slams, has been number 1 repeatedly, and also leaves Australia probably with more question marks than answers based on the very long shadow that he's already created. What did you see from him? He looked lights out in the 4th round. I watched and I'm like, okay, this guy's got something, and then kind of went away pretty meekly against Zverev.
Yeah, I mean, I'm eager to hear your take because I'm really conflicted. You feel like an asshole, right? The guy's 20, or he could retire tomorrow. He could retire, literally say, you know what, I'm done. Retire tomorrow. He's a Hall of Fame player. I mean, this is a blazing talent. He's at some level a victim of his own success. Yep. And yet, I don't know. I mean, I think we got to be realistic here. Since that Cincinnati final, he hasn't made a final. There have been some really strange matches and strange losses, and we sort of said, okay, well, he's going to have a rough fall. He's still trying to pace himself, and whether it's Nadal, I mean, that's part of being a pro tennis player is figuring out how to sustain it through the calendar. He'll come back refreshed. Didn't play a warm up. Didn't have his coach Juan Carlos Ferrero there. We didn't really make much of that. He seemed pretty good. He played Gasquet in the first round. That's sort of a weird match against a guy who might not play in Australia again, but he'll get through. Suddenly, he, as you say, he looked great, and then he shows up for that quarterfinal, and it was almost weird, I thought. I mean, there was no strategy. There were these weird, sometimes he was too passive, and other times he would go for some crazy highlight reel winner when he didn't have to. And I think, on the one hand, look, I mean, he gets to the quarterfinal of the first major, he's let's take a pause here. And yet, if we hold himself up to the standard that we were all, putting on his shoulders after he wins Wimbledon, it's been a bit of a disappointing 6 months. I mean, I'll ask you what I asked with Novak. What's your level of concern here?
Long term, not massive. But like, listen, when you've had a former world number one in your corner able to talk to you during matches, from the time you're 15 years old on, and then you go play a major without that immediate feedback and that voice, and it manifests in maybe some suspect decision making, maybe not being able to adjust on the fly, not going into lockdown mode. If I had those legs, John, I would just run everywhere. Like, you got to make people feel your speed a little bit, not when you're running for a drop shot or hitting a crazy winner, but like every single point, like a Medvedev does, right? Like, it's going to be a slog. And, this probably isn't the technical term, but I don't think he has figured out slog mode yet, right? Like, he hasn't figured out how to literally go full Hewitt. And I'm faster than Hewitt, and I can punch you in the face probably a little bit more, but the speed comp should be there, right? Like, not saying on your good days do that. Like, if you can go punch someone in the mouth and go full Tyson, then rock up and do it, end it, and put your hoodie back on. But if he had kind of a plan C that mimicked someone like a Leighton Hewitt or like a Medvedev, where you can kind of knock that ball down, keep it out of strike zones, to where I can't imagine anything more stressful than having to attack Alcaraz's speed out of my own strike zone. Right. That would be a dumpster fire inside of a dumpster fire, which is offensive to dumpster fires. Like, that just doesn't make any sense. And I just didn't see that progression. Also, we need to talk about when you play big servers, can they take the racket out of his hand, right? Is he a great first serve returner? I don't know. We know he's great on the second serve. He can back up and he can create speed, but that's something to watch. Does he figure out how to chip the ball back in the court a la Murray and kind of dig in on that first ball until he can get on the front foot? Yeah, but I don't think it's going to be super smooth sailing. I think the tournaments that are coming up, obviously Indian Wells is a great surface for him because the ball jumps up and away. That's going to give him some love on the kick serve. I think his serve leaves a lot to be desired. Okay, I don't think that is the one thing that I don't think has really improved much at all in the last 2 years. I remember watching him, kind of his breakout. We knew about him, but winning Miami a couple of years ago, and he was serving 135, and now I feel like he's serving 127. And there's not a lot of motion to it, right? There are big servers that serve straight through the court, right? And so there are the type of servers that serve 136, but if you get a racket on it, you get like that firm pop sound, right? And you can square it up a little bit. And then there's like the Roger type servers that can serve 118 and the ball's sliding against your racket and it just feels a little bit squirrely, right? So where you're kind of hitting foul balls off of the serve. Alcaraz, if he's not hitting that kick serve, right, that's getting you up and away and out of the zone, it feels like people are able to firm up his first serve when he goes after it. You need to create a little motion on that serve. He needs to create a little bit of tail, especially with how good he is on that first ball and how much he can bully you. Right now, it's either even his slice serve feels like it kind of goes straight, right? It doesn't have that like Sampras swing on it, right? Where it's like tailing away from you and you're kind of having to chase it. It's like if you read it right, you can kind of square it up and get that good pop sound to it. So I think the serve is the most obvious place to improve with Alcaraz. But right now, it just seems like there's a bit of indecision, which happens, right? It's the second time through the lineup. Guys are watching his matches. They're seeing where he's good, where he's bad. A lot more guys are playing hard straight through the middle. You saw Zverev do it from the word go. I'm going to hit it big, flat middle. You're not going to have the ability to create angles and kind of dance and fly around because you're having to create off of a nasty low ball that goes through the middle. So you're having to play up into the corners. And from there, I can actually direct traffic line. So I think it's a learning curve. I'm not overly concerned long term, but I think it is a learning tool. I mean, he is going to learn about it.
I'm going to sell out Andy Roddick here real quick. We were talking about Ben Shelton at the U.S. Open, and you said the guy's amazing, especially considering he's still learning how to play tennis. He's still learning how to mix up his pitches. He's got a live arm. He's got a great Nuke Lelouch fastball. But, wait till he adds a sinker and a curve and learns how to work the corners. And I got the same feeling watching Carlos. Like, this was one step above see ball, hit ball, but not much more than that. The flip side of all this, I guess, is, hey, look, if you can win two majors. I mean, he was trying to become, I think, the sixth man in the last 25 years to get to the semis of all 4 majors. He's 20 years old. If you can do that, if you can win 2 majors and you're still learning how to construct points, how, as you say, how to leverage your serve, how to make your serve more unpredictable, and you've already achieved what he has, that's actually, in a perverse way, that's probably actually a really encouraging sign.
Yeah, and listen, all criticisms, because I know you guys are going to get on your little computer, you're going to become keyboard warriors about what we're talking about. Like, how can you criticize Novak? He's won 25 slams. No, that's like how desperate we have to be to actually come up with a criticism, is because he was flat in a match for the first time in 15 years.
Exactly.
Any criticism of Carlos Alcaraz, we do with eyes wide open, knowing that, like, listen, I tried my entire life and came up short of winning 2 slams. This guy did it, as a trial run. So I fully understand it. I fully get it. Save your little fingers from tapping away with your anger. It's out of respect. Like, we're trying to figure out what the difference is 6 months later from Wimbledon. And from where I sit, these are the differences with Carlos. But I don't worry about him long term. I'm his biggest fan. I think he's my favorite player to watch on earth. I love Sinner. I love Medvedev. Like, I have so much respect for him, just because people don't really understand what he does when he's on the court, because it doesn't jump off the page. I love Alcaraz. I cheer for Alcaraz. He's one of the best things in our game. That being said, we can't come here and say, yeah, that looked good. That looked like him. It didn't. It just frankly didn't. And, they'll correct. Juan Carlos Ferrero doesn't get enough credit for having kind of nurtured this talent, not from when he was already 10 in the world, but from when he was a kid, and turned him into the #1 player in the world. So they will figure it out. I hope JCF's knee's a little bit better. Must have been pretty bad if he couldn't make that trip, knowing him. But I do look forward to that. I'm not worried about it long term. Before we get too far away from it, we have to talk about Aryna Sabalenka and the women's draw and what she did. And I want to give her so much props, right? We kind of become victims of the moment. We say, well, Sabalenka, we all knew when she was 19, she was, bigger and stronger than everyone. Like, shut up. All of us had doubts. All of us had doubts. And if you try to forget the part where she had full-blown serving yips and would have, it caused this kind of snowball effect of, panic, mental insecurity, I think, when you're on the court, and to go through an off season and clinically deconstruct a serve, come back, have a counting mechanism, and then we haven't even seen parts of it, right? Like, we still see Zverev, who's battled with it, and he'll throw in a double fault where he's been fine for 2 hours, and then there's 2 doubles, but they missed by 5 feet. We haven't had that thing from Sabalenka, in a long time. And so to get over those mental hurdles to become what she's become, all of us that criticized her need to eat poop right now, because she has absolutely come through it and been amazing. It is a testament to mental fortitude and work. It didn't happen by accident. She absolutely worked at it and deserves these successes.
I'm going to take a break, if you don't mind, to eat poop. No, because I think we're all saying the same thing. I mean, I said, if you could do a word cloud like a year ago of Sabalenka, 13 months ago, a word cloud of her, what would you say? You would say, you would have said, all right, Belarus, remember, she couldn't even play Wimbledon 2 years ago. We would say a lot of power, but she can't keep the ball in the court. She can hit through anyone, then she can come back the next match and she can hit her way out of a match. We would say yips. You and I know this. I mean, there are athletes in the NBA who got free throw yips and it ruined their careers. There are baseball players that got yips, like you referenced Chuck Knobloch, ruined their careers. Rick Ankiel, exactly. Had to reinvent himself in a different position because he had what she has done is so remarkable. She didn't get broken this whole time. It wasn't even just, hey, I've overcome this and I'm no longer double faulting 20 times a match and I don't have to serve underhand. She didn't get broken the whole tournament. I mean, she didn't lose a set the whole tournament. Her serve was an absolute asset. We would have said that this is a player who's a little, honestly, I mean, in the best way, she's a little bit of a mess. She's erratic. She's emotional. She's, goes through coaches. And in the last 18 months, she has been absolute consummate professional. Ever since that, remember the Belarus ban at Wimbledon? So she couldn't play Wimbledon 2 years ago. Since then, she has been a semifinalist or better at every major she's entered, 6 on the trot. She's won 2 majors, and she was so put together. I mean, physically, she's in great shape. She still hits the heck out of the ball, but go look at her stats. It's not as though she's doing these, 30 winners, 35 unforced errors, and just plowing through. she's playing some defense. She's picking her spots. She's getting early breaks. So she gives herself a little bit of cushion. Absolute professional performance. And I think it's a little like Sinner, what we were talking about. It's really encouraging. It should be really encouraging to a lot of players how quickly you can kind of rewrite your story. And the word cloud around her today is so different than the word cloud around her would have been 15 months ago. And all the credit in the world to her. The match against Coco, honestly, I think match against Coco was the only match when an opponent got more than 3 games in a set. And I like that she sort of called out that match. It was like UFC style, right? Like, I lost at the US Open. I wish I'd handled the situation.
She said, I want revenge.
Yeah, you don't hear players saying that. They may think it. You don't hear them articulate. And then she, and it was nothing dirty. It was nothing hyper aggressive. She got her revenge. And I'm really impressed by the way she's completely reauthored her tennis story and did so in her mid-20s. That's my TED Talk.
Yeah, and also I need to I've realized as I've been thinking through this and watching her last year at Australia, this year at Australia, but also like making her way through majors consistently. Swiatek, #1 in the world last year, like she feels like the safest player. And now, but like you look back at the results, and now I don't know that that's true. And it's just the way that she operates. She's intense every point. Her head's down, not a lot of histrionics. Feels like a worker. The footwork is always there. And like I kind of let the eye test get in the way because what you said, 6 majors in a row, semis. Sabalenka is always there. I let past reputation get in the way of what was right in front of my eyeballs. Like she is the most consistent player, woman player in the world right now. And I don't think it's up for debate at this point. I mean, I think Swiatek is able to put a lot of points on the board in clusters. She's probably has the best upside where she goes through people and she wins, a World Tour Finals 0-1. She wins, puts on like when she gets on a roll, the confidence comes in bunches, but she's susceptible as she's proven early in these events. Sabalenka is the most bankable player on earth right now. Tell me why I'm wrong.
You're younger than I am, but are you old enough to remember when Emma Raducanu won the U.S. Open? That wasn't that long ago. Sabalenka gets to the semis. There is no other top 16 player in sight. And not to be too uncharitable, she basically chokes and loses to Leylah Fernandez. That's the kind of player she was. She can, blast her way past anyone, and then you get her on the wrong day, and Leylah Fernandez can take her out when she's a U.S. Open semifinalist, and the title really ought to be hers. This upgrade, I think, is so underrated. And, we love it when players come out of nowhere and they win titles, or when players it's different than Coco. It sort of has a different rhythm to so many other players. But I think she deserves so much more credit. I want to ask you about Coco real quick. I don't know, take this wherever you want, but I understand you have a sort of a tennis task rabbit where you're available for consultation with specific jobs. You want to talk about Coco a bit?
Yeah. So I will say, and I told you this offline. Coco came and we worked on her serve for a couple of days. That was said ad nauseum during the Aussie Open. It was a couple of days. I could sit here for 30 minutes and sing her praises. The way it came about, obviously the connection with BG, with Brad, when he starts working with her. Brad and I text regularly. When he's on air on a telecast, we're trading notes and trying to figure out what's going on. And Brad and I have a really good relationship now. And so when that happened, he's like, we got to, he kind of said in passing one time, I'd love to get her in front of you, work on a serve. And I was like, okay. A lot of people say a lot of things and nothing ever happens. Like I've been readily available sitting here wanting nothing in return, but I just like going through, like a tennis nerd out where you're part of a very small part of trying to like help someone improve. And so then after the US Open, BG said, hey, listen, it was 20 years ago. We were here. He goes, before everyone gets here, why don't you come? This is where Coco is going to be celebrating tonight. He goes, why don't you come and like have 2 beers with me before everyone gets here? I'm like, I'd love to. That'd be so much fun. So we come there, the night goes on, and then, slowly he says something. He's like, we're coming in the off season. I'm like, okay, great. No problem. You're welcome. I'm available. Then like, I kind of, when it became real to me was different members of Coco's team, including her father was like, oh, we're looking forward to coming this offseason. I was like, oh, so this is like outside. This isn't just Brad being Brad. And so, they made good on it. And, a couple of simple adjustments for Coco. It's easy to work with, someone as talented as her, with her athleticism, with her physique, with her ability to kind of like take concepts very quickly. I was blown away. Basically, the short version is, and it's been told already, but my version is her toss was very inconsistent. So on good days, you really wouldn't notice anything. She could have good serving days, but she was actually having to she had never really thought about her toss, right? So it was like arm elbow position. She folds at the end. And I said, I think one thing can really make a dent in all of those issues. I go, you toss the ball from kind of like your waist, and you kind of like have this little like flip motion up, which creates spin and then you're having to like chase it. So when it's working, it's fine. When it's bad, it's real bad, right? Like in at World Tour Finals last year, I think it was like 25 double faults in one match type bad. And obviously it was windy, but so I said, listen, what we have to do is we have to create a little bit more margin. We have to create something that's bankable, and it's going to create more speed, and the ball's going to like turn a little bit more. And I said, all you got to do is you got to release it from your fingertips and not your palm, and it needs to be released shoulder height. And so that brings the toss down. All of a sudden, your toss isn't 7 feet long; it's 4 feet long, way more in control because there's just less work to be done. And John, I've kind of tried to help people before a little bit, and it's like I'm speaking a different language, right? And it's like you're trying to, there are some people who take the information very quickly and are able to digest it, and the output looks something like what you wanted. And then, I've worked with, different players in the past in passing where it's like you're trying to explain it as well as you can, and it's like they just discovered hands. So, with Coco, 15 minutes in, she understood the concepts, right? And the good ones were turning. The good ones were, 124 pretty much on command. The second serve was consistent, had more height. Then she just had to figure out, which we saw kind of in real time with the pressure mechanisms that Sabalenka puts on her. It's like, now that I have these options, when do I go after a second serve? Do I move it around the box? She has the tools now, I think, but there is going to be a little bit of a learning curve. But credit to her, taking something new, walking it out a month later in the biggest of situations, and not going back when it isn't really working perfectly. I think Coco will be a dominant server. I was blown away by the 2 or 3 days that we spent together, right? The feedback she's able to give very quickly, what she's able to take in, the professional manner. Like there are people that are a lot, they just don't work as hard. They react to stuff in a more negative way, who are a lot less accomplished than Coco Gauff, who doesn't have the hype mechanism that is around her, is not a household name like Coco is now. And just her control over her orbit and what's going on blew me away, right? For someone who hasn't quite turned 20, I was absolutely blown away. I will show up for her anytime she asks. I am so impressed with her, and I had a blast. I was miserable when she lost in Australia. I never in my life thought I'd be waking up at 3:30 watching a match and having the result affect me for the rest of the day and the next 4 days. I couldn't be a bigger fan of Coco.
Just to be clear, she came to you, right?
Yeah. So that was kind of another thing. It's like, listen, I'm going to be one of the only people in your existence that doesn't ever want or need anything from you, right? I'm not looking. And by the way, I would have never talked. Brad started talking about it, and then it was out of the bag. I would have taken this to my grave. Like no one needed to know that we even met up. And frankly, it was weird because we were at a club in Charlotte, and she came here. I didn't travel to her. That was kind of my one thing. I was like, I don't want anything from you, but I'd like for you to show the commitment to come here, if you're motivated to do so. And credit to her, she did, 6 days after her season wrapped last year. So she showed up. There's, 50 some odd kids that can't believe that they're actually seeing Coco Gauff. And I'm like, there's no secrets. It's going to be out today. And no one knew anything until Brad talked about it before the Australian Open. I don't care about my part of it. I care that I think the adjustments make sense. I think long-term, they're going to get even better. And I think she will be an absolute dominant server day to day. And if you take her ability to break serve and combine it with someone who can hold serve, hit a bunch of aces, up the percentages, and have that kind of, default, I can run everything down and make your life miserable. Listen, we don't need to, there was a lot of runway before we ever touched her serve. And I think she's got a lot of majors in there. Credit to Sabalenka, because she went out and punched her in the mouth and took her out in the second set. Played the level in the second set was really good. The first set was a little spotty. Second set was two people who are really good at their craft, kind of going toe to toe.
I feel like you are confirming what casual fans and what people that are around Coco say about her, right? She wears her fame very comfortably, but it's not about being famous. She's committed to getting better. She's cool. She's disciplined. She's self-possessed. This sounds like this is high praise from you.
Yeah, and also it's been spoken about a little bit, but it needs to be spoken about more, especially in our sport where there has been a negative history of fathers of women tennis players being psychopaths and being irresponsible to the total human, right? Not the tennis, but the total human. Corey Gauff was here also, and his ability to not be the center of attention doesn't need the information to come from him. That is rare, and it sounds like something that should be very obvious, and it's not. In the history of our sport, it is not. There are a lot of cautionary tales, and I won't name them because out of respect for the people who are on the bad side of those cautionary tales, but it has been rampant in our sport. So to find someone who says, listen, after Wimbledon, it's not about me, he knows a lot. Like, he has data sets. He knew exactly what she was holding. He knew if she could hold 6% more service games, what the AI projections were and what that meant for match wins. The guy has studied and he is dialed. And for him to kind of take a back seat, let Brad be Brad, which is like a weird orbit in itself, and let me, who he doesn't know, have a say in her serve for a couple of days, like, bravo. It needs to be said over and over again. I hope this creates precedent for other tennis parents, especially of young females.
You're here. No, I think you're right. I think what is like any industry? What do? You look at who's successful and you take some cues. So we were talking before. Something could be as silly as maybe I don't need an Australian tune-up, but I wonder how many tennis parents see this and say, you know what, this is Coco. There are millions of dollars on the line. She's already reached a major final. You know what? It's the summer of 2023. Things aren't going as we hope. Time to reset. And it's not every coach, it's not every tennis parent, it's not every parent of someone that age that would be so willing to shake things up like that. I think I'm glad you made that point, and maybe this leads to more and more of these hyper attentive parents saying, you know what, if Coco's parents can step back and recognize there are different ways to do things, and maybe she needs to hear different voices, and maybe she needs to go to Andy Roddick for a long weekend of serving tutorials. Maybe I'm willing to let my kid, and candidly, more often than not, my daughter, do the same. So
yeah,
glad you said that.
I needed to go on that tangent for a second.
Good.
Let's talk about the rest of the women's draw. Huge congratulations to Aryna Sabalenka. I could not be more impressed by your process and how you've kind of gotten through all of it. It's like being open, serving yips. That's the foundation of your entire career at that point. And to deal with it, come out the other side. Bravo. Well done. We do need to talk about Queen Wen, and also want you to touch on Paribas and any and all other things that you saw on the women's side. Time for your shout outs. What kind of stood out to you on that side of the draw?
Yeah, she did not have a murderer's row of opponents to get to the final. Didn't have to play a seed, but we say this all the time. You only can beat the player on the other side of the net. I do think she passes the eye test. I mean, I do think you watch her play, you watch her movement. She's early 20s. This is a real player. This is a proper top 10 player. Didn't have a whole lot of resistance in the final, so be it. And I'm glad you mentioned Paribas. I mean, I think this team in general. Remember, Wim Fissette was coaching. Was coaching Queen Wen and basically got poached. I mean, basically, he got a sweeter offer, left. She was very outspoken about how
Let's also, for those who might not know, because Brad took a lot of the shine, obviously, from the U.S. Open, but explain Paribas, his role with Coco, and explain kind of that sequence of events before we get to his partnership with Queen Wen.
Yeah, I mean, Per Reba was in Coco's camp. He had sort of come on midway through last year. Not a coach. This is not a coach that people necessarily know a lot about. He's got a good reputation, but has worked with a few players here and there. Brad comes on. I mean, let's candidly, Brad's track record speaks for itself. This is,
Yep.
as far as I'm concerned, this is the Hall of Famer,
Yeah.
based on his coaching
Absolutely.
resume alone. But
Yes.
Brad's a lot. Brad's a handful, and
Yep.
Per Reba basically, I don't know the specifics. There was a shakeup. Anytime you hear, this as a sports fan, anytime you hear somebody say, "I'm leaving to spend more time with my family," you raise an eyebrow. So Per Reba leaves to spend more time with his family through a strange series of events. He ends up coaching.
That was a hell of a 6 weeks that he spent with
Yeah,
his family.
exactly. It's like yeah. Remember, it's like Michael Jordan's retirement. But I mean, I think the truth is sort of big picture. You have a player who felt, spurned. You have a coach who one suspects feels spurned. They get together, and they've got a good thing going. And Per Reba, so he's at the U.S. Open. He's in the final and gets the gets the celebratory dinner as part of Coco's team. Very next major, a lot's happened, and again, he's sitting there in the stands of the final.
Right
So, Per Reba, a lot of credit. This is not someone who is popping off on social media. This is not a self promoter. This honestly is not a coach that I think many people know particularly well. But not unlike Brad, his track record speaks for itself as well. And it was a nice little sidebar to this whole story that this player coach team that both I think might, if you gave them sodium pentothal, they might say they were a little mistreated and felt a little spurned. Nice to see them have this kind of success. And she's in the top 10 now. She's not going back to Luxembourg either. I mean, her life is going to change. She's going back to a fairly significant country in the global economy with a fairly significant population. So she'll have some adjustments to make as a top 10 player from China. But again, I think you just watch her play and you sort of say to yourself, you know what? This is a player who is going to compete for majors for many, many years. So congrats to her. And next time she gets to a final, she won't be a first-time finalist. So one suspect she'll put some more points on the board.
Add on to any one of these observations. Great to see Aryna Sabalenka back playing well. Left the tour last year for mental health reasons. Women from the Ukraine playing great. Kostyuk making the quarterfinals, almost taking out Coco Gauff. Yastremska coming through qualifying, had kind of full Raducanu going inner sights, getting to the semifinals. I still remember that video where her and her sister are taking the last train out of the Ukraine a couple of years ago. So that is nice to see. Listen, the comebacks from names that are massive in our sport. Naomi Osaka getting down there, mixing it up. My favorite thing about that is her committing to play a packed schedule. She will find it at some point once her body comes back to tennis shape and the beating of in and out of the tour. The ball striking will start to make sense again. I thought Emma Raducanu looked pretty good in Auckland, losing a tough 3-setter to Svitolina coming in. She won her first match easy in Australia. I'm going... But then it was like that Raducanu speed bump, right? Where she gets through some matches, like, okay, this could be it. She's going to kind of, and then loses to someone who's 90-ish in the world where, you hope she commits. And but it's good to see kind of these storylines. I think there's, kudos to, this is a check for Three Amigos, but I think there's a plethora of great stories on the women's side right now. I thought it was really exciting. You didn't have to look far for storytelling.
All right, Andy Roddick, I'm going to give you a hot take. The tennis secret hiding in plain sight is that careers are longer than ever, and this has all sorts of impacts. What does this mean? Well, for one thing, it means that if you're not happy playing tennis, you need a little mental health break. You can take it. You don't have to worry you're squandering prime years of your career. It also means that you can go to college for a year, 2, 3, 4. You don't have to go right from age 17 to the pros because you can suddenly play deep into your 30s. There are all sorts of benefits, and one of them is a player like Aryna Sabalenka can say, you know what, tennis isn't making me happy right now. I want to be a normal kid in my early 20s. I might take some college classes. We'll see if I miss tennis or if I don't. And you can do that and not worry that you're squandering this that this really, really small window's closing, because you've got plenty of examples. You can play for a decade more if you want to.
Yeah, there's a couple things, and I was writing it down because I think you're spot on with this. And I knew people were playing longer. I know there's more runway, but to kind of run that back to Aryna Sabalenka and her kind of not having to waste the stress that used to have to be wasted on taking some time off is a big deal. And while we're on that subject, we need to give a tip of the cap to a couple of things that have made this more possible, right? One, if you can afford to take a break, that matters, right? So prize money in tennis is a big deal, right? You're not going paycheck to paycheck, grinding for weeks. So, more prize money in majors, I wouldn't have thought of it this way, but actually might up the quality that we see more often than not, because people are actually prepared, ready, and there because they want and need to be there. Also, we cannot talk about these comebacks and the mothers involved and taking maternity leave without referencing Kim Clijsters and the fact that how inspirational is it to win 3 out of your 4 majors after becoming a mother, right? So Kim's one of the best people. I love her to death, but also setting that stage to make it's becoming normal now, right? It used to be an exception, and now it's oh, great, I'll see you after you have your child. I can't wait. Whether it's Kerber, Osaka, Wozniacki coming back, Svitolina coming back. I mean, it's the norm now, and big names, which is awesome. People like Federer coming back from injuries, taking the full 6 months off, and then coming back and winning in 17 at the Aussie Open, right? Being able to take that time off, not rushing back. That sets the tone. Novak not overplaying, Serena not overplaying. And by the way, when a knee surgery is a scope and now you're back without any major scarring. So tip of the cap to doctors also with the longevity special. But I think that's a great point. Creates a little bit of space. You can kind of get rid of the sense of urgency a little bit until you're right. And props to Aryna Sabalenka and all the moms that are literal actual heroes with what they're doing, and then coming back and being superheroes on the court again. Very cool. John, my friend, thank you for the time. We're over in an hour and it feels like we just started. I hope it feels that way to the people that are listening and viewing. Also, I hope that this is something we can do regularly. If you want to spam Tennis Channel and tell them to put this on the air in some way, shape, or form, it is at Tennis Channel. We'd love to do it on TV. No problem for us, right, John?
You got it. And the next segment, we can talk about your explanation for the poster behind you, but we'll have to save that for part 2.
Look at, who do you like? Do you like Andre Agassi, or you can see Jon Wertheim's chin from 15 years ago? Look at that thing. How was Pledge Week?
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't know, that's for my student council run. It's the guy in jeans arresting against the Las Vegas limo is where we're going next. But all good. This was a lot of fun, man.
As always, a lot of great nuggets from the legendary Jon Wertheim, calling in from Sydney on a trip for a little show called 60 Minutes. I don't know if anyone else has heard of it, but apparently it's a big deal. Listen, I thank you for joining us on our first show here on Served. I appreciate Jon Wertheim and his time. Just an absolute legend in our sport as far as journalism goes. We will see you next week. This is going to be a weekly thing, weekly adjacent at least. I appreciate you sticking it out with us. We'll get better. You'll get better. We'll all be better. We'll see you next time on Served.